We are live. Welcome to another episode of Livelunch. This is where we have a conversation based out of our teaching from Sunday and over lunch, discuss it in more depth, draw out some themes. And I'm Matt Carvel and joined by Matt and Christine today as we think about the topic of, generosity, giving. We're looking at the subject of the Good Samaritan parable that Jesus told. But both of you have been on Livelunch before. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
Hope you're enjoying the food from Corcoro today. Matt.
Hello.
For people that have maybe not seen you on this before, who are you? What do you do? What are you involved in?
Yep, and I'm one of the elders, and my primary responsibility is to look out for the Shoreham site.
Brilliant.
Over in the west, the Wild West, as some call it, and also leading our care team. So last 18 months or so, we've been really kind of honing what we do in terms of our social action to our city. Lots and lots of projects. Say more about that in a minute, but it's been great, really superb. Yeah.
Brilliant. Christine, you have been part of the church for many years, but also part of the team here and our pastoral content, do a lot with Bible studies as well, leading our women's Bible studies. Going well this term?
Yeah, really well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, depending on which site you were in, depends on which who was preaching the message. But the message was from the Luke chapter 10. We're looking at the Good Samaritan and looking at that parable to explore the themes of generosity. As a church, we're in our gift campaign through the month of November and giving money towards our care projects. And as Matt said, we'll speak about more about that in a bit. Stephen, who was preaching at the Clarendon Centre, had some small group questions for us to discuss and to think about. Maybe I'll just run through them first of all, and then we'll just bounce out our conversation from them. The first question was, how and why are the two commands, love God, love people, so linked? And then secondly, in what ways does the parable paint a picture of the beauty of the gospel? Thirdly, the priest and the Levite crossed the road. Why do they do that? And why are we tempted to do the same? As a challenging message. And then fourthly, having compassion is a calling of every Christian. And how are you working out your calling? So lots to challenge us there. Why don't we think about that first question that we've been given there? How and why are the two commands, love God and love people, how are they linked? How do they work together? How should we understand them? Do you want to start off on that?
Yeah. So actually, it's really challenging when it talks about loving God, because it talks about with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. There's a really strong repetition to make us think about, it's all of us. So if we love God in that way, and that is a challenge, I'm not saying that we all absolutely make that all of the time, then the second command really flows out of that. Because of our love for God, we will love his people. And that's not just Christians, but it's all of his creation, people made in his image. So in that way, the two are linked. It's not that you can sort of pick a mix and think, I'll just do this. I'll just love God and I can't do that one. Or I'll just love people, but I can't. No, they are actually really integral to one another.
Yeah, I guess we're prone to gravitate towards one another, thinking of our religious life or our following of Jesus, just be like, well, as long as I'm being at church and worshipping and my spirituality. But I guess Jesus pushes us beyond that, doesn't he, Matt?
Yes.
For sure. And I think the challenge comes where you begin to unpack it in your mind. So actually what's being said here is that the same power, speed, affection and force that I care about myself, I need to somehow learn how to discharge that to others. And not just others that I like or who are like me, but those that are unlike me and even undeserving, in my opinion.
It's a challenging passage, the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's also slightly confusing as well, I suppose, if we're reading it in terms of thinking, like Jesus seems to be, it comes in response to someone asking Jesus a question about how do we inherit eternal life? How do we get with God, essentially? And it seems like Jesus is pushing him to do stuff. And that can sound like it's contrary to what we often teach about grace and like love of God, about faith. Like the way we get to Jesus is through faith in Him. So how are we meant to understand this in terms of he's saying like do this, love, like what part does our doing of loving others, is that what gets us to God? Is that how do we to understand that? Because it seems like contrary to faith. It sounds like he's saying do this stuff rather than have faith. What do you think about that?
Well, everybody comes to God through faith. It has to be through faith and grace that we come to God. But we're not really going to love God unless we've repented ourselves.
Okay.
No, we're not going to love Him fully.
Yeah.
Because if we're holding sin in our hearts that we're unrepentant about, we're not truly loving God, are we?
Okay.
So there has to, and certainly when we first come to God, there has to be repentance on our part to get to that place of loving God. So I think that's the first thing, and the second is that the other, as we just said, flows out of that relationship.
So that order is important.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The next question I got here. So, God, we've been thinking a lot this term about being generous, giving, particularly to disadvantaged, the poor, that sort of thing. And often that is part of church's practice. But what would you say to someone who said, well, look, the church getting involved in those things, it's not really the church's place to do that. If the church is there surely to be a spiritual help to people, and there's charities, other institutions, councils, it's their job, it's not the church's job, it's their job to help people in society and that sort of thing. Why is the church getting involved in it? Why does the church have a role in this stuff?
Yeah, I think this. It's interesting. We're looking at a passage from the New Testament, but the idea of being generous to the disadvantaged. It's not a New Testament idea, if you like. I mean, one of the verses that really lives with me, and I trust our whole foundation of how we serve Brighton and the wider conurbation. Will be from Jeremiah 29, where people of God are exiled, and God says to them, "Seek the welfare of the city, because in its welfare you'll find your welfare." This is a command. I want you to do this, and it kind of really feels to me like, okay, we're God's special people, but He's put us here in this moment in time for a reason, and part of being God's people will be to seek the welfare of where we are. And it's easy
to lose that, isn't it? Sometimes even as Christians we can think, well, what people really need is the gospel, the news about Jesus. We should just prioritize all of that, but you're actually saying no, there's more. There's that as well as Keller who
Tim Keller,
Mr. Tim Keller. Yeah, that's right. Just thank you for correcting me there, Mr. Tim Keller. Yeah, Pastor Dr. Tim Keller. He church in New York. He would say that actually, as born again Christians, believers, we are all gospel messengers.
Okay.
And so, lots of us can talk until the cows come home about what God's done for us in our lives. But He's also calling us to be gospel neighbours, which I think is a really interesting idea, a way of describing it. What does that look like? How does that outwork in my life? And I think churches, who are gathering believers regularly on Sundays and during the week, we've got a fantastic opportunity to say, hey, look, your lives are like living letters, as Apostle Paul would describe it, where we get to do our lives in such a way that people ask questions, and it's only and the answer to those questions can only be found in what's happened to us, the change that God's done in our hearts and minds. They'll need an answer to explain how we live our lives, and so I feel like. Certainly, as a church in our city and its wider conurbation, our motivations for serving those who are disadvantaged come from a different place, perhaps.
Because I guess the message of the Bible is not just about the forgiveness of sins. It can be reduced to that. I think right the way through the whole of the Bible, you see God's compassion and desire for his creation, for his people to be thriving. And I suppose, that's something you see the right way through, isn't it? Like, and I guess even, especially in the Old Testament, we can miss that a little bit about the sort of the theme of God's. It seems a little bit surprising, like God's desire for and attention towards the poor. Even in the, I guess there'd be a lot of examples of that in the Old Testament.
They would, yeah. I think I don't know that it is difficult to miss, because you see it all through the Psalms, all through the Proverbs. You see it in Isaiah, that God's continually speaking about justice for the poor and the oppressed. And that they're close to his heart. I've just got Proverbs open in front of me. It says, "Whoever despises his neighbour is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor." And there are verses like that throughout the Bible that we see, in the Old Testament. But we also see it in the life of Jesus, in just the people he picks out. He picks out a tax collector up a tree, somebody who's an outcast in society. He stops for a woman who's been bleeding all this time, another outcast in society. Because the poor are, we tend to think of the poor in kind of one box, perhaps people who are hungry and perhaps need to come to our food banks, but the poor are so much more than that. Could go on.
So I guess what we're taking that theme from the Bible, strong theme from the Bible, of God's compassion for all types of people, but there seems to be a particular priority for those most overlooked in society. So I guess as a church, we've kind of taken that and tried to live according to that, and plan and strategize and use the resources that God has given us according to that here at Emmanuel. So tell us more about that, Matt, then. Tell us about care, how that fits, what we're involved in, because some people might not know the sort of how we do that.
Yeah, I think the whole COVID era has given us a bit of time and space to think as a church, what is it that we do in this area of being gospel neighbours, if you like to coin that phrase again. And I think caring for our city being an umbrella phrase that we're using to really have 4 areas that we can locate projects that are going on around church life. I think it's helpful to better present, certainly to our church, but also to our city, the kind of stuff that we're involved in. They revolve around people, premises, and partnerships, which is a helpful way of thinking about it. And we want all of our locations across the city to feel ownership of projects and ownership of work for the disadvantaged in their area, and so engaging our sites to feel ownership of those projects is first important. So these 4 areas will be food insecurity, so that's where our food banks would sit. The second one will be well-being, and so these are projects that we are engaged with revolving around drug addiction, mentoring, counselling, those sorts of things. Then we have housing. And so we have a couple of houses that we put people into those houses, and we care for them. We help these men and women out of addictive lifestyles, re-socialising, re-skilling. And then, of course, we have our last one, which I can't think of.
Family?
The family, sorry. Yeah, family, yeah. I need to work out an acrostic for that, don't I? That's yeah. And so the family one, it's a big deal for me. People know my story. But we really do care about the family as well in this church, because we are a family. And so working with other churches in the city, even this spring coming, we're wanting to put on a foundations course to help people take a step of interest towards considering fostering and adoption. But we've also got a couple of projects running called Baby Basics, one in Shoreham, one in Brighton, which looks out for mums that have just had a baby and they don't have the wherewithal or the finance to supply all the consumables that are needed for a brand new baby. So they're brilliant projects. So those are the 4 areas that we're really concentrating on. And it's by no mistake that these are the 4 areas that is a concern for the next decade for our national government. So they're not like things that we think is a good idea. They are real, right here, right now things that need addressing.
Yeah. So, like in our city, you speak to the council, speak to people involved.
Yes.
They would say these are the areas that is most locally there's most need, and you
right.
as a team and we as a church are seeing that and thinking, actually, okay, let's do our bit.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
connecting with other organisations, connecting with the council, in order to do that.
Yeah.
That's great. So it's obviously really inspiring, really challenging. We're encouraging people to give financially, get involved. I guess for people, for some people are thinking, well, I'd like to, if things were different in my personal circumstance. So I guess for the someone listening to this who their heart's in the right place, they want to give, but actually things are quite difficult for them, things are challenging, and thinking, okay, can I just give this a miss? This opportunity to give. What would we say? What would we say to that? What would be? What would you think?
It's challenging, isn't it? I mean, I'll admit this weekend just gone. You know, preaching and teaching it, you just feel the weight of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's in Galatians where it talks about bearing one another's burdens.
Okay.
And so it helped me to understand that actually, if what I do in this gift day, whether it's giving my time, my energy, and my money, has that been costly for me? Is it a cost to me?
Okay.
Otherwise, there's no burden being borne.
Yeah.
Is there? So if it's not like a burden to me, if it's not, if I'm making this decision with my money that's going to be costly in another area of my life, right there you're bearing a burden. And so that's a good question to ask yourself. And it's certainly not to guilt anybody. No one wants to be guilted into giving, but it's important to understand why rather than just mindlessly giving. I think
I think what you just said there, it links to faith as well. When there's a costly step, it's like it's a step of faith, it's a step of trust, it's a step of I'm doing this not because it feels comfortable, not because it's easy, but because I believe it's something of God that's convicting me about who God is, but also about the need that's there, and stepping into that. I mean, maybe talk a bit, Christine, about the place of faith in this, the place of, we want to encourage one another as a church community to be looking to God in terms of the giving. I guess what I'm trying to ask here is, if people are, what do we miss out on if we stop giving or pull back from giving? I know you've got experience and stories and the times it's been difficult, the times that you've actually kept going in the giving. It's costly at the moment, but what do we gain? I suppose what is the blessing of it as well? Well,
I suppose we don't really want to separate giving to the poor to any giving because it's always a temptation not to give when we feel less well off and have less resources. But what we miss out on is this adventure of faith of actually saying, I'm going to take you at your word, Lord, and I'm going to believe you when you say you provide for me and you provide all my needs. So there is a step of faith to be taken. And my testimony would be that God has never let us down, but I wouldn't say it's always been immediate, because I think sometimes we can say, great story about giving at the gift day. I gave this and then God provided this 2 days later. Great, fantastic. Doesn't always happen like that though. But overall, God will provide for our needs because that's his promise to us. Now, when we're talking about giving to the poor as well, we see in all these scriptures that I was alluding to earlier that's God blesses those who look out for the poor. So there's even more reason there. But when we're just starting out with giving, any giving that we give isn't a matter of digging into my pocket and seeing what I've got. Our giving should come from a place of, well, I really love God and I want to give to him and to his work. Lord, I don't know how to do this with the money that I've got. Would you help me? Would you give me faith? And then moving forward from that point, rather than thinking, I've got to find this money and give it away, and I don't know how I'm going to last, the month, or it's got to be from that place of your relationship with God and your faith in him as Father and provider.
Brilliant. So good. I guess Stephen also talked about not just the giving in the moment, but a sort of, I guess Jesus pointing out a way of the Christian life, as in to love neighbours in an ongoing way, to have an attitude of generosity, of mercy, of looking to bless others and be a neighbour to others. What does that look like? How if someone is hearing that on Sunday and saying, "Yeah, okay, I recognise that. I want to do that. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I take a step forward?" What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think there's multiple opportunities for people to get involved in projects. They don't have to be the projects that as a church that we put on.
Okay.
I think it's great. Dive into the community in which you are a part and look to serve in that way. But there's definitely volunteering opportunities in all of our projects across church life. I think if you are interested, just email us at care@weareemmanuel.com and we'll add you to our
brilliant care@weareemmanuel.com.
Yeah, so please do that, and then we'll be in touch. I think. What does that look like? I think again, I just want to yank it back a bit to the whole motivation of wanting to get out and serve, and I think that on Sunday being able to say that it's impossible to do gospel neighbouring well until you recognise that you've been neighboured. And I think that understanding that's the motivation, because I think what that does is it frees you.
Yeah.
It frees you from feeling like you've got to do this or you've got to do that in a moralistic way.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's secular or religious. We don't want to go down the moralism thing. All of our gospel neighbouring has got to find its source in knowing that we've been neighboured by Jesus. So a little practical thing there, but just important. The motivation thing's huge.
I think often we think, oh, I couldn't do that. But I don't think we're being asked to do something we can't do. I think it's really good to look at what's our skill set? What are we good at? Are we people persons? If I'm a people person, then maybe I could visit elderly, lonely people, something like that. I don't think it's about, suddenly becoming someone you're not. But it is about using your skills. If you're really good with tech, you could support a charity in that way. So I think it's a lot wider than thinking just about certain categories of people, because actually there's a breadth of ways that people can get involved.
Yeah, because I think when you see someone or you see a ministry or a charity or that sort of thing that is doing really good work, and you think, being generous to the poor looks like that, and you can get a fix in your mind, that's not me, and then I'll just give money, and giving money is part of it, but also if you want to give your time, actually there's different ways in, and there's different skills that are needed and that people have.
It's been totally brilliant, really, being in the food banks, seeing some of the church members in the various locations just kind of getting stuck in and really loving it and feeling like they're playing a huge part. And I'm looking at them thinking, you're just being yourself. It's just so good. I really appreciate that. I think it's also worth saying, Matt, just to grab an opportunity to speak to the business community, people who are leading businesses, who are running startups, whatever area you're in. I have the privilege of connecting with quite a few of them with the business network at Emmanuel, but thinking about corporate social responsibility is a bit of a buzz thing, as a business, are we ticking that box? And companies all over the place like to do their bit, in the social sense, and that's not wrong. But if you have an authoritative decision-making voice in a company like that, then please throw your money in our direction, because we want to be able to keep releasing projects and people in order that we might keep developing what we're doing for our Care for Our City umbrella, if you like. So throw us your money.
Brilliant, what a note to end on. Well, weareemmanuel.com/care is where you can find out more information about some of the projects that we're involved in, and also the place to go to get involved in terms of giving to our giving campaign for this month. And next week we will be back, probably for the last one in this series, because we're coming to the end of the Your People series, and we're talking about your kids. your kids. So that is the topic for next week, parenting. Hope you join us for that. See you soon. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.